Now, this episode today is for those of you who are in a relationship who want to get better at having hard conversations faster. Now, to be honest, I think that this is an episode that all couples can benefit from. Whether you are not good at having hard conversations at all and you want to make an improvement in that, or whether you're quite good at having hard conversations and you're wanting to get even better, to get really slick at the process of growing and refining your relationship and your life together. Now, as you know, I've been a counsellor for 20 years, and over that time, I've seen a number of couples who have struggled with holding on to things for far too long. Now, I've mentioned before that when couples come for counselling, they typically say one of two things. They either say they're struggling with conflict or they're struggling with communication. And a key thing I get people to do is define what they really mean when they say one of those two things. Now, when it comes to communication, often where we land is that a couple will determine that actually they're not good at having hard conversations. They hold on to things for too long, they find it too difficult and uncomfortable to raise certain topics, and they let things fester between them. And I really hate seeing couples who live in this space of things just being good enough, of avoiding difficult conversations and never actually getting to a point where life feels smooth and you feel really connected most of the time. That is actually what you deserve. We do not deserve having mediocre relationships where we live in this disconnected flatmates kind of a world. We want to feel emotionally connected to our partners. We want to feel like we're on the same team. And part of that is being able to raise things when they're tough or when they could do with improving in some manner. Now, what happens if you don't have hard conversations quickly enough is that you end up stuck in resentment, stuck with assumptions, getting hurt more and more over the months and years as they roll on. So we don't want this for our relationships. We want to protect our relationship against those things that eat away at us, that create disconnection between us and lead us to feeling unsatisfied with unmet needs in our relationship. So whether those conversations that you need to have are about money or parenting or sex or loneliness or unmet needs, there are lots of topics that couples need to be able to have slightly difficult, awkward, uncomfortable conversations about. And as I look on at good, strong relationships where people feel well connected to one another, they have this skill of being able to raise things more easily with each other and reach some kind of resolution. So firstly, I just want to normalize why it is we struggle when it comes to raising difficult things in our relationships. Now, our brains detect relational threats just like they detect any other kind of threat. So we can end up shutting down and avoiding things, having that fight, flight, freeze mode activated within us when we are scared of certain things within our relationship. So for some people, they're not having those difficult conversations because they're worried about the threat that those conversations pose. Whether that is the risk of being rejected or the conflict escalating or it feeling even more disconnected. Our brains treat relational threats just like any other kind of threat, and it can cause us to shut down and freeze. And even for people who are high functioning, who have amazing careers, who have great communication skills in other facets and areas of their lives, they can really struggle with this because the person we love the most, who we're most connected with, has got quite a lot of power to accept or reject us, to make us feel like a failure, to push our buttons in a particular way that only someone that we've known and lived with for a really long time can do. But we worry about having those difficult conversations because they can leave us extra vulnerable to things going wrong within the relationship. It can feel like anytime you're raising something difficult, one of the possibilities is things escalating and becoming worse. So today as well, I am going to give you some tips for having those difficult conversations. But this explanation of why it is difficult, I hope normalizes for you that this is tough for a lot of people, and you can be great at communication in other parts of your life and really struggle with this in your relationship. Also, when it comes to these kinds of issues, we often have stories that we tell ourselves about how the conflict is going to go, and those stories are worse than actually the conversation itself. So we build these things up in our mind. We feel really worried about having the conversation because we've got a story that we have built around this, where we're telling ourselves that this is going to end badly, or I'm just going to end up feeling rejected again, or whatever it is that we're afraid of, we hold on to and build this story around. In my own relationship, there are times where I've put off certain conversations, and when the conversation has actually happened, more often than not, things have felt really good in our relationship after that chat has happened. Think about when you go out and have a date night, and even if you're not talking about anything super problematic in your relationship, you just feel good for being able to air the things that you want to talk about. It is really good for us to lift the lid every now and then, to be able to have these conversations when we need to, and to get faster at having them, so those stories that we're telling ourselves about the conflict don't just build and escalate into having a life of their own. The other trap that I see couples fall into when it comes to having difficult conversations is that maintaining calm means avoiding these conversations. And there's this sense of having peace at any price. But then the price that you pay over time gets greater and greater the more you avoid having the difficult conversations that you need to have. So my ambition here is to help you get better at having these conversations quickly, not putting them off, knowing how to have them, and knowing how to have them in a way that they are safe and productive within your relationship. I want to point out as well that it is a sign of growth and health in your relationship if you can have difficult conversations. Now, often I think that people somewhere along the way get this confused and think that if they're having conversations where they're coming into some little bit of conflict with their partner, that is a sign that things are going badly, that they're not doing well. And it's actually the absolute reverse of that. Really good, healthy couples are able to come into some kind of conflict, to raise issues with each other, to have these difficult chats, and to grow and adapt through these conversations. So it's important that you scratch from your mind the idea that having difficult conversations is a sign of weakness or failure or dissatisfaction in your relationship. I would actually argue that these conversations are indicators of health in relationship, of your relationship being satisfying and connected and heading in a good direction with two people who are growing together. So let's start seeing having difficult conversations as actually being a metric of our relationship being in good health. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the things that you want to avoid if you're raising a difficult conversation with your partner. Now, the first thing that you want to avoid is raising multiple issues. This is so hard, and you actually have to be quite disciplined in order to do this, because it is so tempting when you finally get to that difficult conversation to be able to go, and this, and this, and this, and this. I know that it's kind of like when you go to the GP and you're like, right, I'm finally here. I've got my shopping list of my 15 things that I need to cover with you. And the reality is that if you go in with one or two issues that you're seeking to resolve, you can be really clear about getting an outcome on those things. It is just too tough to raise too many things all at once, and you don't end up with any outcome or landing in a place that actually closes the loop on those issues. So don't treat this like you're going in with a shopping list, and be really disciplined in the interests of your relationship and only raising one issue at a time. So you have to think there really clearly about what is it that I want to raise? What is it that I want to change here? And how am I going to spend this conversation in terms of the outcome that I want and the thing that I want to most focus on? It is also really important that you don't threaten the relationship through this conversation. And I've got a resource on my website called Fair Fighting Rules that you might want to have a look at in case that helps you avoid some of the pitfalls here. But something that is really important is having an agreement with your partner that when you have difficult conversations, you're not going to threaten the relationship. And what I mean by that is that when you're having a tough conversation, you're not going to be saying, oh, I don't know why I bother. I just may as well leave. I just may as well do life on my own. This is never going to work. We may as well just end up getting a divorce. Escalating to that point of threatening the relationship never helps the relationship. And as tempting as it might be in terms of getting a reaction out of your partner or expressing the extent of your hurt, it is not helpful. And I often ask couples to think about harmful or helpful when they're in conversation with their partner. Is this thing that I'm going to say going to help our relationship move forward or pull us further apart? And threatening the relationship when you're trying to have a courageous, difficult conversation is a surefire way to end up doing more damage. So have that conversation with your partner. Can we make this commitment to each other that when we're raising something difficult, we don't threaten the relationship? We don't threaten that we're just going to leave, or we may as well not try anymore. The other thing to avoid is you always or you never language. Now, as soon as I have said this out loud, I am sure there are people who are going to go, "Oh, I know that I do that." So you always do this. You've always been like this. You've never loved me. You always treat me like a slave. You always reject me. You never want me. You never wanted to be with me. I've never been good enough for you. You're always like this. Those kind of you always and you never comments are not helpful, and I'm pretty sure they're not even true, because it is really difficult to be that bad all of the time. So if you've got something that you're wanting to raise, that you're wanting your partner to not do, that's having some kind of impact on you, that you're wanting to discuss together, just raise that thing. Don't turn it into a you always or you never conversation. Chances are that's not even true anyway. The other thing that you want to avoid is ending up in a really vague and general direction. And it certainly helps here to have very clear ideas about what it is that you're wanting to discuss. So often couples have conversations that just end with, we'll try harder. Okay, I've heard you. I'll try and do better. I'll try and pull my socks up. And the difficult thing about that is it works for a really short period of time and then it doesn't work anymore. And we actually need to be able to land in a much more specific place, because trust is built in our relationship when we have a very clear agreement about, okay, we've raised this thing, we've come up with a plan, this is what's going to happen differently, and then we're able to stick to that. It builds and restores trust between us when we can make a plan and a commitment with our partner and stick to that. These really general, vague things that we do, where we just try and be better, are not positive outcomes of these courageous conversations. So we want to be able to be very clear, what is it that we're committing to each other? Okay, so here we go with some tips for when you make it into that courageous conversation. This is my how-to guide to having the difficult conversations in your relationship. The first thing that I want to say is I want you to normalize the awkwardness. Because if you're trying to get better at this and you haven't been good at this over the course of your relationship, then it is going to be kind of awkward and clunky to start with. But it is one of those things that is well worth getting through the awkward and clunky stage to be able to smoothly have hard conversations much faster and much more efficiently over time. So you might say something like, I know this is hard. I know we kind of suck at this. I know this is really awkward, but I think we'll get better at this over time. Or the more we keep practicing this, we have to get better at this. So normalize the awkwardness. Normalize that it is a hard conversation and that you're not well practiced at having these. Laugh it off if you need to. Talk about how you listen to this podcast and you're trying this new thing and we're doing our best to get through having a difficult conversation and being able to have these more regularly. Here we go again. Sorry, it's a bit awkward, but this is good for us. Find a way to normalize those conversations. The other thing that you want to do that's really helpful when you're having difficult conversations in your relationship is hold in mind the vision for how you want to feel in the relationship. Is it that you want to feel like a team? Is it that you want things to feel really equal between you? Is it that you want to maintain connection? Is it that you want to achieve together? What is it that you value in the relationship that is your vision for how this relationship feels and how you both feel within the relationship? If you can start with that vision in mind, then these difficult conversations become much more purposeful and they have an end goal in mind. The next piece of advice I have is that when it comes to difficult conversations, you want to be really clear about what it is that you would like to change. I love the phrase that behind every complaint is an unmet need. So sometimes what we're wanting to raise in our relationship isn't about the thing. It isn't about the dishes or being left to do the school run or bearing more of the mental load or things not feeling fair and equal. It's about the needs that we have that are not being met. It might be needing to feel nurtured, really wanting to feel wanted or accepted? What is it that you're needing from this conversation? Where is the unmet need in relation to this issue? So the more you can communicate that, the conversations that you're having have a depth that help you to move forward in a more purposeful and healthy direction. So be clear about what it is that you need to talk about practically, but also try and join the dots for your partner around those unmet needs. Now, you're not wanting to kind of launch in and say, it's always me doing the dishes, and so I feel so unvalued all the time. But what you're wanting to say is, when things feel a bit more equal with doing tasks around the house, I feel more valued in this relationship and I feel safe and secure. So I'm wondering how we can get things feeling a bit more equal so that I'm feeling good in this. And you're wanting to put the issue out on the table, being able to be clear about practically what it is that you're talking about, but also the need that sits behind that practical thing. And keep in mind here, you're wanting to think about one shift, not fixing absolutely everything. What's the one shift that you're looking for as an outcome of this conversation? Now, you've heard me talk about this before, but pick your time and your place, because I see so many couples who just go wrong on this front. They have the difficult conversation on the way to the sports game on a Saturday morning in front of the kids, or they're having the conversation at the height of some kind of argument after dinner. Actually, you need some privacy for these chats. They need to be at a time when you're feeling calm and settled. So pick the time and place that works for you. I once worked with a couple who worked out that actually their best time to have communication about things that were difficult in their relationship was after going to the gym, because they were feeling good. They had some good happy hormones going on in their bodies. They felt emotionally regulated, and therefore they were able to have those conversations. So on the way driving home from the gym was their optimal time for those difficult chats. Now, I think all couples have some version of that, so I wonder what that looks like for you. But time and place are really important. I also think posture is important here, because it is really difficult to be adversarial with each other if you're in physical contact of some kind, if you're snuggled up on the couch together with a cup of tea and feeling relaxed. So think about that time and place factor. This is why so many couples have good chats on long drives. So maybe you just need to schedule a long drive. So flowing on from that, think about those moments that you're feeling emotionally regulated and try and enter the conversation from that emotionally regulated place. It'll mean that you listen better, you have better empathy for each other, better patience in the conversation, but certainly try and attend to your own emotion regulation needs before that chat happens. Next, you want to lead with the soft emotions. You want to lead with a bit of vulnerability, being able to share about how things are going for you, being able to lead with something that feels soft and not adversarial. So talking about, I'm really struggling with this. This is something that's feeling really hurtful for me, or that I'm carrying that feels really heavy. Invite your partner into the conversation with those soft emotions, and you're much more likely to have a successful conversation. The next thing that's important to do is adopt some kind of team language. So this is not you versus them in a case of you winning against them. This is the two of you are a team and you're teaming up on an issue that is on the table between you. So this is combining your powers together to resolve this issue that it is that you're tabling. This is something we call externalizing in the counseling world, and it is a really powerful tool for couples having difficult conversations. So you're wanting to talk about the issue in a manner where you're united and you feel like a team and you're approaching this together. This is really helpful because it helps your partner feel like you're collaborating with them and this is not a personal attack. So you want to think here about what success would look like. What is a good outcome here? And how do we collaborate to that end point rather than this is me sharing with them and I'm trying to win against them. And you're wanting to use both and language here. It can be really helpful. So you can say something like, I really value our relationship. And when it comes to this one thing, there is some dissatisfaction for me and I want to work on this. So you're able to say something positive about valuing things, and there's this thing that needs some attention and work. Another version of that is, I understand your perspective and I need you to hear mine. So being able to adopt that both and language can be really helpful. Along those lines, try and keep things positive. So just like when you're having a work meeting about an issue, you don't just say negative things to someone else that you're working with. You would say, here are the things that are going well. Here's what I'm enjoying at the moment. Here's what I'm appreciating about our conversation. And I'm wanting to bring some attention to this issue. So don't forget to weave those positive things into the mix of your conversation too. These are the things that I'm valuing in our relationship. These are the things that, from my perspective, are going really well right now. This is what I'm appreciating. But I'd like us to pay some attention to this other thing over here. The other thing I think is really important when you're having a difficult conversation with your partner is to approach this from a perspective of inquiry. So if you come into this conversation with curiosity, you're wanting to understand things from their perspective, that is really helpful. Because if you're raising issues with your partner, then you're the one who's starting from a position of power. So a way to get things to feel more equal is to give them the first opportunity to speak. Hey, I'm wanting to talk about this, but I first want to know, what's your view on this at the moment? How are you experiencing that? What's happening for you around this? So start with that perspective of giving them airtime. The reality here is you already know what you think, and this conversation is an opportunity to hear things from their perspective, to get them thinking about the same issue too, and for you to hear how things are landing for them. So adopt that stance of inquiry and curiosity with them. What's happening for them around this? How are they feeling about this? What's their take? Now, for some couples, they actually need a regular time for these conversations. They need a moment where the lid is lifted and they have an opportunity to say things or not say things. If there are no issues, you don't need to talk. If you can have a regular time set aside that is your moment for reflecting on your relationship, then that is a structure that some couples need, or they just never get there to the difficult conversations. I once saw a couple on a really regular basis just because they didn't know how to have these conversations on their own. They needed some role modeling. They needed someone alongside them to coach them while they learnt these skills, because they were just not having any of the conversations that they needed to have. And a good counselor will scaffold you and help you learn to have these conversations by yourself. But if you're really not naturally inclined towards having hard conversations, it can be super helpful to structure it and schedule it. I know that that sounds boring, but it is likely something that will really protect your relationship going forward. The other skill that you need to have if you're entering hard conversations is knowing how to exit them if they get too difficult. So being able to push pause and say, I don't think we're heading in a good direction with this right now. Let's just wait. Let's come back to this tomorrow. How about we watch a movie together? Let's go and do something else together around the house. How about we go for a walk? Let's just come back to this another time. So being able to pause the conversation is a really important skill. And it's not at all a mark of failure. In fact, I really like to hear when couples are able to push pause, because it means they're attending to their own safety and the other person's safety in the conversation, and they're trying to keep things constructive. So a pause isn't a mark of failure here. I think it's a mark of success. You need to be able to push pause if the conversation is not proving to be fruitful or one of you is getting dysregulated in some way. I worked with a couple once who had a rule that if they got out of sync in a conflict conversation, they then waited for 48 hours before picking up the conversation again. And if in 48 hours, whatever it was still mattered, they would talk more through that. But often they would be able to drop whatever it was that they were stuck on, because the passage of time had sorted that out. So they could revisit the issue of the conversation without being stuck at that same point that they had got stuck on 48 hours ago. Now, I think that that is a really clever strategy if you know that you're someone who can get worked up about a particular issue and trying to win an argument over a particular point. Give yourself a set period of time before you try again in the conversation. That is not saying you don't come back to the conversation, and sometimes having that set period of time means you also know that if you had that chat on Thursday and it didn't work out, you're going to be having it again on Saturday, because this is what your rhythm looks like together. The other helpful skill here is being able to repair in real time. So you're not going to be perfect at these conversations. Sometimes things are going to come out wrong, you're going to make things worse, and it's super helpful to be able to say, oops, that didn't go well. That came out harsher than I wanted it to. Can I try and rephrase that? So don't be afraid to repair in real time. Stay self-reflective in the conversation. Correct yourself if you need to, and acknowledge that you're not going to get it perfect all the time. The other thing that's important is to stay in the present. So commit to not raising issues from the past. And sometimes I hear couples who drag things out from early marriage years when they're having a conversation about a present day issue, and they might have been married for a number of decades. It is not helpful to use a conversation about an issue right now in your relationship to raise a backlog of things that you have been holding on to. You are well able to resolve an issue by talking just about the present day manifestation of that issue, by just being able to talk about what is happening right now in your relationship when it comes to that. You don't need the back catalogue of this issue, all of the past examples. You can leave those where they are. So commit to just talking about the present day version of whatever it is going on. Now, keep in mind that what most couples want in their relationship is for it to feel emotionally safe, for it to feel connected in their relationship. And actually, how you get to that is through having these difficult conversations well. If you can master these skills, then they build and add to your relationship. They add emotional safety, they add a sense of connection and team that is really valuable and important. So these conversations aren't just about resolving issues and making things better in the here and now. They're about building your connection together, building your sense of safety and team with one another. So let's recap. Having difficult conversations in your relationship matters if you're wanting to build a relationship that's filled with emotional safety and connection. Avoiding things might keep things calm in the moment, but it certainly doesn't build a solid and safe feeling relationship. And over time, that avoidance leads to resentment and assumptions that corrode your relationship. You want to avoid being vague, you want to avoid multiple issues, you never or you always language, and you want to avoid threatening the relationship if you're going to have constructive chats. You want to normalize the awkwardness, be clear about what you're trying to achieve in the relationship, be specific about the change that you're wanting, but also connect it to the unmet needs that you're experiencing. Choose your time and place, make sure you're feeling emotionally regulated, lead with those soft emotions, have team language, inquire curiously with each other, name the positive, have a regular time for these chats if you need to. Don't be afraid to pause, repair in real time, and stick to the present, not the past. Well, I hope this episode has inspired you to think about how quickly you're able to have courageous conversations in your relationship. This is a skill that is really important. It is not a sign of failure in your relationship. It is a metric of your relationship's health and success. You want to get really good at having difficult conversations as quickly as you can for the health of your relationship. So I hope this has inspired you to get that little bit faster, whether you really suck at this right now or whether you're quite good and you want to get even better. Don't forget to share this episode with your partner if you're wanting to work on this together. It is a great idea to listen to the same input at the same time. And if your relationship is needing a bit of a refresh and reset, and you want some more structure around having difficult conversations, then I'd love you to check out Give Me 10 Minutes. It is a 6-week audio-based course where I step you through some of the key relationship challenges I've seen in my 20 years of practice as a counsellor. And I help you to learn some skills and insights to refresh your relationship and push the reset button so you can feel good and connected, avoiding conflict in your relationship going forward. Give Me 10 Minutes is available all the time for you to start at any point you want. And this year, I'm also running cohorts of Give Me 10 Minutes, where you get an extra layer of support from me to work through the content of the course and be able to have encouragement, access for questions, and for me to help you stay on track with the course content as it goes. People have spoken really highly of this course so far, and how even after one session, they feel like they're back on the same page again. So if you're needing that in your relationship, it's available now. Thanks for joining me today, and good luck with those tricky chats.